Serious Reddit, what's your most disturbing, scary or creepy true story? In 3rd grade, I had this strange short teacher named Mrs. Todd. She was always super nice to me in class. She'd always call on me to do the fun activities first, compliment me whenever I did something, and was generally just very positive toward me. At the time, I thought she was perhaps my favorite person in the world. I remember even telling my mother about how much I loved Mrs. Todd. Anyways, one day, I sat down at my desk and opened it up to put crap in it, when shockingly I saw that there was a Victoria's Secret magazine sitting in the pull-out drawer. The kid sitting next to me noticed how shocked I was. I thought I was going to get in trouble, and we started talking about how it might have got there. Almost immediately, Mrs. Todd walks up, asks, "What have you got there?" I was seriously confused and told her it was sitting in my desk when I got here this morning. Well, she looks at me and tells me that the kid sitting next to me must have put it there. She kept repeating that statement over and over again to both him and me until I finally admitted that I guess he could have put it there. Maybe a few days after that, she approached me after class to tell me about this special field trip I could go on if I kept doing good in class. It would be a trip with just her and I to the Gulf of Mexico for the weekend. I remember being really excited about it at the time. However, suddenly she got replaced at the school, and we got this new teacher that didn't like me as much. I was so heartbroken at the time. It wasn't until many years later that I realized how f***ed up that situation was. It scares me thinking about it still. When I was about 8 years old, during recess at school, I noticed a bunch of other kids outside a storage room yelling and warning to others not to approach the door because there was an eyeball staring back at you. I was curious because I didn't understand what they meant, but I could see their fear was real because their faces were pale white as they would try to deter me from taking a peek through the keyhole. I remember bending down slightly so I could get a closer look inside, and sure enough, there was an eyeball staring back at me, and it freaked me out so much I peed my pants on the spot. It was only later in the day, after I had ended up at the nurse's office because of the commotion us kids had created, that a janitor had to go into the room to inspect what this whole mess was about. Turns out that someone had placed a mirror against that door, and the eyeball we were seeing was our own reflection. When I was 7 years old, I was walking to my babysitter's house all by myself. She only lived a block from the schoolyard. I done it all the time. This car pulls up beside me on the road, and the driver keeps gesturing to me to come closer and shouting, "Come here. Come here." I'm frozen on the sidewalk and shaking my head no, while my knuckles turn white clinging to my backpack. All he says, before driving off, is, "Stay away from Christina." And then I never saw him again. Christina was one of my on-again off-again friends in grade school, along with another girl who alternated between hating me and being buddy-buddy. I had completely forgotten about it after a while and went on being on-again off-again with both of them. In 5th grade, the other girl invited me to the pop machine in the back hall at lunch. Cool, okay. Quality time with a girl I've known since I was a baby. Sure. We get back to the classroom, and Christina tells me that people were playing with my lunch and hid my stuff, but she was nice enough to bring it back for me. I started drinking the pop I'd brought for lunch, and something was really off. I spit it out and ran for the water fountain to rinse my mouth out. Turns out, Christina and her sister had topped up my drink with Lysol. If I drank much more, I probably would have been stupidly sick. The police were called, and a restraining order was put on both of them. It was delightfully ineffective, however, because the school was so small there was no separate class to put them in. They got 3 and 4 day suspensions. I have no idea if the two events are related, who that man was, or how he knew how bad Christina was at the time. But that memory sticks with me to this day. I was outside playing with friends one afternoon. We were around 9 or 10. We lived in a quiet area. As we were playing, we noticed a man in a truck drive by over and over again. Each time he passed my friend's yard, he would drive slowly. We then realized that this man was recording us with one of those old handheld recorders. It freaked us out. We ran inside their house and called his mom. She told them they needed to stay inside and that I should go home. I tried explaining that my mom wasn't home at the moment, but she still made me leave. I lived about a mile or two down the road. I've never ran so fast in my life. I was terrified that man was going to find me as I was running back home. When my mom found out what happened, she was super pissed off. My friend's mom hadn't allowed me to stay at their house until she could come pick me up. When I was a kid and lived in my old apartment, my mom befriended the downstairs neighbor and would often invite her over for coffee and tea because she was always so lonely. A few weeks went by without hearing from her, so we both go downstairs and knock on the door. It was like a movie, where when you knock the door slowly crept open, as if it had been this way for a while. We walked inside and found her in the bathtub covered in blood and the smell was disgusting. Apparently the lady's girlfriend left her and she couldn't handle the pain. My mom's way of comforting me was, "Don't worry, Mark. She was our friend, so she won't haunt us. Gee, thanks, Mom." My wife and I stayed at a small rental property in Bath, UK this spring. Whilst in bed I heard the gate to the property, right outside our bedroom window, open and close quietly. This immediately made me jump up and become alert. I heard someone trying to quietly walk on the gravel walkway to our front door until the motion sensor light came on. I saw a person's shadow dart against the wall outside of our room and instantly went into attack mode. I ran into the kitchen and grabbed a knife from the wooden block and stood at the front door ready to pounce. It was silent for way too long, and then I heard someone running away and the gate slam. My wife said that once the motion light turned off, the person took off running. I have no idea what their intentions were, but I almost stabbed the hell out of someone that night. It still gives me goosebumps thinking about it. Probably just my entire life would count as a disturbing, scary story. My mother and grandmother were always extremely protective over me. As a child I grew up forbidden to visit friends or family, walk down the street, go outdoors by myself, or even cook or drive. It got worse and worse as I grew older. I mean, I was 19, and my mother forbade me from having a job. She told me that I had everything that I needed right there with her. I didn't need money. I decided that enough was enough and saved up some money from doing laundry and finding change around the house, swiping what I could here and there, and I had to hide it well. She would steal it from me if she found it. She said that all money was hers and hers alone. I packed my bags one day and tried to leave. She actually tackled me to the ground and dragged me back inside with my grandmother's help, had my phone reported stolen, and took it from me so that I couldn't make calls, and slept beside my bed to make sure that I didn't sneak away. She took me to a church meeting one day, holiness, and had the demons blessed out of me for 3 hours solid. No one would help me. She had them all convinced that I was nuts and needed help. She even recruited a cousin on my next attempt weeks later, when I actually got a bus ticket, to come and trick me into the car. Cousin told me that she was protecting me, helping me, but she wanted to talk to me first. Shut the car door on me. After I got in, it had a child safety lock on it. They drove me home and kept me isolated for a solid year before I could get help. Some of my relatives even parked their cars in the driveway for a while to keep me from leaving. I'm in my room, sitting in front of my computer, working late at night as usual. I have to go pee, so I head out the door. I'm staying with family for a few weeks, so I try to be super quiet to avoid waking anyone up. To get to the bathroom I have to go around a sort of left-handed U-turn. I've stayed in this house for a month or so every year for as long as I've been alive, and I've done a lot of midnight pees, so I know the way by heart. I go out the door, take a few steps, left turn, few steps, left turn, down the hall, and into the bathroom. I turn the light on in the bathroom, do my business, turn the light off, and start making my way back towards my room. I don't want to turn on the hall light at this point, again to avoid disturbing family, so I'm basically blind. I feel my way down the hallway, right turn, few steps, right turn, and suddenly holy f***, I swear I saw a shadow or something move. I stop dead and listen as hard as I can, still totally blind. Nothing. So I take another few steps and I swear to God I saw a shadowy figure move towards me, directly towards me, out of the solid wood door to my room. I stop again and feel panic start to set it. This is the creepiest thing I've ever experienced since childhood nightmares, and I used to have some pretty up ones, like that my dad was trying to kill me. I'm not imagining things, I definitely saw a shadowy thing moving towards me in the dark. I take one more step towards my room, close enough to the door to grab the handle, and the shadowy, creepy as hell thing moves towards me again. It's getting bigger every time, it's right in front of my face, inches away, but I can't quite focus on it. I start to seriously freak out. I actually consider calling for help, sleeping family be damned, and that's when my nose bumps into the mirror that hangs on the wall next to my door, at a 90-degree angle to it. Turns out I got totally disoriented and never made my second right-hand turn. The end. When I was 4 years old, my father, stepmother and baby brother all died in a highway collision with a semi-truck. They parked on the side of Highway 84 in West Texas between Lubbock and Abilene. They stopped to check on the baby who was having a fit. The semi-driver had been over his hours and veered onto the shoulder and hit their car going downhill at about 70 miles per hour while they were stationary. No one but the semi-driver survived the ensuing damage and fire. Being 4, I hadn't been around him that much since my parents split, so I to this day don't have any recollection of him at all. But I ended up attending Texas Tech in Lubbock and consequently drove past the exam same spot on my way to and from DFW to Lubbock. I decided to research the incident, and I found an article of someone who saw the accident and called for help. They lived in the house at least up until when the article was written and put on the internet. But they always described seeing the young family, my family, from the crash walking along the side of the highway, continuing their journey but never getting any close their destination. Which sadly enough they were coming from Albuquerque to Houston to pick me up for a few months. I was actually at a loss when I found the story. I broke down, which was weird because I never knew this person, they're a part of me, and I don't even know who this is. I attempted to find the spot of the accident by asking some locals who surprisingly remembered the incident from the late 90s. I was able to find the approximate spot, and I took a couple moments of silence while I was there just to show respect. It's one of the stranger stories I have. Edit. Thank you everyone for kind and inquisitive replies. This part of my life hasn't really left me looking for any answers, but it still leaves me with an empty feeling that's hard to describe. Always be safe driving y'all and never drive sleepy. This is just one accident. My friends or family have been involved in dealing with exhausted driving. And always tell your loved ones just how much you love them every chance you get. I was in my mid-20s, walking home from work across my local park. It was summer, broad daylight. The park was fairly dodgy by night, but safe and busy, with people relaxing and walking their dogs during the day. I always made a shortcut through a small gate in the middle of the park, which led out to the road. On this day, there were 2 youngish Asian guys blocking the gate. I had a gut feeling that something wasn't right and that I should avoid them, but reasoned I was being stupid and continued on. I just asked them to move when I got to the gate. But as I edged closer, one of the guys disappeared from view, and the other suddenly started shouting out to me, "Hey, you got the time?" As he did this, I realized the second guy was now crouching behind the nearby bushes. I took a few steps more, and then noticed that there was a car parked next to them, and 2, maybe more, guys were crouched alongside the car. In an instant, I realized something was wrong, and I did an about turn, quickening my step in the opposite direction. The same guy then started shouting again. "Oi, you, what's the time?" My adrenaline racing, I sped up again towards another exit from the park. The guy didn't shout again, but I was scared all the way home that they were following me. My hands have never shaken so much when turning the key in my door. I fully believe that I avoided being ganged or kidnapped that day. I didn't think I had anything really creepy to post about until I started reading through them and read something similar to an experience I had. It started around my sophomore year in high school. I began getting creepy texts and phone calls, but never really, though much of them, since in those days prank calls was a common thing to do. The messages and calls would come in consistently for a few weeks, then would stop after a while. I honestly would forget they had even happened until they'd start back up again. Around my junior year, the calls began getting creepier. They would call my house number along with my cell phone. This was around the time cell phones were starting to get popular, so, while some of my older friends still had my house number, it wasn't something I would give out to people anymore. When I started dating, they began calling my then boyfriend and would tell him awful things about me, and sometimes even know where I was at the time, and ask him to question my whereabouts. It caused a lot of issues between us, but again they would stop after a while, and apart from wondering who it could be, I never thought much of them again. Fast forward to college, I stopped talking to a lot of my friends from high school, even deleted old MySpace accounts, and cleared friends from Facebook because I wanted to have a fresh start. Was still dating the same guy, but really stopped having contact with most of the people I knew from high school. Halfway through my freshman year, the calls and text messages started again, this time with even more personal details about my life. Like always, right before I considered them serious enough to report, they would stop, and I would slowly forget they'd even happen. Sophomore year, I moved out of the dorms and into an apartment with 3 girls I'd met the year before. One night I started getting the usual texts again, but this time they were threatening to Photoshop nude pictures of me to send out to people I knew. I tried ignoring them, but the texts wouldn't stop. I would block one number, and they would come in from a different number almost immediately. I got really creeped out and decided to change my number the next day. At this point, I was not sure who it could be, but I had become paranoid and stopped trusting anyone except my boyfriend. I isolated myself from friends and began going into a depression. I sometimes was sure it was so-and-so from high school, but could never come up with proof of anything. Fast forward a few months and I'm at a concert with my boyfriend. He got drunk that night and we'd gotten into a huge fight over it. I was home with my parents that weekend and got home around midnight. Around 2 a.m. the calls to my house phone started coming in. Yes, we still had a landline. One after another we were getting calls from men asking for my services. We tried blocking calls, but like before, it was just different numbers one after another. Finally we just unplugged the phone. The next morning, I had to explain to my parents what had been going on for years, and together we made a report and changed our landline number. Turns out, someone had put my phone number on Craigslist and listed me as a prostitute. By now, I finally began realizing that my boyfriend had been the one constant during most of these incidents, and that our drunk fight that night could not have been a coincidence with my number being posted on Craigslist. It took a few tries for me to leave the relationship. He was very manipulative, and I had spent years isolating myself from friendships and trusting only him. I finally left him that summer and chose to forget all of these things had ever happened. It took me a while to be healthy enough to start dating again, but when I did, I met a wonderful guy who is now my husband. I mentioned what had happened to me before, but thankfully was emotionally distant enough from it that we just commented on how awful that had been and moved on. Last year, however, I began getting text messages again. I had a new phone, new number, new friend circle, blocked anyone associated with the ex-boyfriend, trusted the people in my life not to hand out my number to anyone, so I was so scared when it started again. Thankfully, this time I had my wonderful husband with me. After it happened a few times, where I would get text messages only when I was with my husband and the texts insinuated that I had been cheating on him, we decided that we weren't going to take the chance that it was coincidence. We hoped that we weren't being followed, but the timing and content of the messages were obviously meant to cause a fight between my husband and I. We decided to make another police report, this time citing my ex-boyfriend as a suspect, and once again changed my number and limited the people who had my number even further. Since then, I am happy to say that I have not gotten any unknown calls or messages. The detective assigned to my case attempted to contact my ex-boyfriend, but he was never able to. In any case, I think that he realized that this time I was serious about pursuing legal action against him, and he stopped. I was lucky that this was the case because technically, I did not have proof that it had been him. Anonymous harassment is actually really difficult to pursue legally for many reasons, so thankfully approaching him was enough to make it stop. When I think about this experience now, I realize how disturbed and manipulative that guy really was. I have no proof that the prank calls I got before I met him were him, but if I think about how I met him, it just all looks so planned to me now, even though then it seemed like something out of a Nicholas Spark movie. I hope that those calls were coincidence, but I'll really never know how far this guy went with his stalking of me. I'm just glad to be out of that relationship and to be emotionally healthy again.